Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Hour here on GeForce TV. Cam K back with you as your, I guess we're going to come up with some new terminology. No longer a wingman, as it's not just Pinty's that is presenting the series in 2024. Hope you guys are all having a great week. It's been a new start to a fresh week. Only a couple more weeks until the holidays kick into full gear. But definitely want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight. It's going to be a pretty low-key show. There's not much to talk about in the series. There's a couple of articles that we're going to take a look at. One to do with the NASCAR series, which is very interesting. And then we're going to take a look as well at the big article that came out from Adam Stern. And this is not the first time that the news from Adam Stern has come out, but maybe there's a little bit more to it this time around, and we'll get our thoughts, everybody's thoughts on that. Didn't see any of the Canadian guys at PRI this year, Jim Haynes says. They were there. Corey McAllister was down there. Two Speed Motorsports was down there. Epic Racewear was down there. Dan Bailey was down there. Kyle Steckley was down there as well. I saw him with the folks from Butler Seats taking a snapshot. Ryan Cowan and CalPro Motorsports were down there as well. In terms of if they were there for like having a booth, I'm not sure. But there's definitely some representation from the Great White North at PRI. Obviously, there's big question marks for a lot of names next year. And I would have expected that they would be out there at PRI trying to do whatever they can to try and secure some deals and try and find some good places to find places to race and series to race, meet some new people, make some connections. It's not an easy thing, unfortunately, and you got to get down there. And there's a couple of interesting things that we want to bring up, and one of those would be the news that Trayton Lapsovich mentioned we had on the show, and he was asked when he was at Five Flags if he would be returning to the Pinty Series and now the NASCAR Canada Series in 2024. It doesn't sound like it is the plans are that they're going to be racing here. But we're looking at potential changes coming to this series, obviously more than just the schedule, but in terms of people being around, part of it, Jim Haynes says, just must have missed them, or maybe it was a little easier last year as you had Kyle on a week or two before. It's probably possible. With everything with Kyle that Kyle was doing, and he had several interviews, he and Trayton, so I didn't want to add to that. Obviously, they're young kids. You don't want to overwhelm them right away, and they did great jobs handling everything that came following the big race at Five Flags, and we'll see them again. There's plenty more opportunities for them. I know that both families really are putting forth a big effort to try and get those young stars into some good equipment running down south. In fact, actually, former NASCAR Pinty Series driver Connor James actually announced that he's going to be running some CRA street stock races starting out at Bristol next year. So Chase Pinsino, we already know, out of the APC series, also going to be running in the in the late models for Carson Hocevar. So lots of names getting their opportunities to run down south, and so that kind of leaves us with a big question mark as to who's going to be around next year. So we'll try and take a look at who we see that's going to be a part of things, but we also want to make sure that we take some time to celebrate this past season and look forward in what is on our list for next year. What is on our list for something that we'd like to have happen? What is our holiday wish for 2024? So definitely take some time to think about that as we continue on here. Bit of some news, small news, that typically takes place off season. But the eNASCAR Invitational for iRacing is returning. This article, of course, from the NASCAR.ca page. Now, there's some interesting things to talk about. The iRacing tournament takes the top drivers from around the world. The NASCAR International waves the green at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. More than 25 racers, including reps from the NASCAR Canada Series, NASCAR Mexico Series, NASCAR Whelen Euro Series, NASCAR Brazil Sprint Race, and NASCAR's 3 national touring divisions will tackle a doubleheader featuring the Los Angeles Coliseum and Brands Hatch Indy layout with a $5,000 prize on the line. The action kicks off at the Quarter LA Coliseum, which will play host to the NASCAR Mexico Series for the first time, February 4th, before the NASCAR Cup Series clash at the Coliseum. The event begins with a series of 12-lap heats. Set the grid, followed by a 40-lap main event. From there, it's off to England, where the Euro Series will stage a doubleheader on June 8th and 9th. At Brands Hatch, all racers will compete in an 8-lap sprint race and a 16-lap feature. Now, interesting enough that they've only mentioned 2 races so far, which is a little interesting. But $5,000. Fans can expect many of NASCAR's top iRacers to take part, and this is the key thing here, including NASCAR Hall of Famer Dale Earnhardt Jr., 2023 Xfinity Playoff driver Parker Kligerman, and NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series frontrunners Ty Majeski, Carson Hocevar, and Raja Karuth. Other drivers expected to contend for wins include Trayton Lapsevich, and they spelled his last name wrong, missing the H off of the end of it, from the Canada Series, Paul Jouvreau from the Euro Series, Victor Morales and Jake Cozio in the Mexico Series, and former iRacing pro Jeff Giassi in the Brazil Sprint Race. A full entry list will be released closer to the event. The NASCAR International iRacing invite will stream live tomorrow at 6 p.m. on all NASCAR at NASCAR.com and all iRacing social media networks. So we've got some of the Canadians, at least one right now, and I'd like to see a little bit more representation from the NASCAR Canada Series. Whether or not we have racers that are on iRacing, that's the other story, though. I know Kyle Steckley has it, and we definitely know that Trayton Lapsevich has it. But I believe the last couple of years, it's only been Jocelyn Facteau and Trayton Lapsevich that have participated in this. Maybe JP Bergeron as well. But we need to get that a little bit. We need to get a little bit more representation there. But it's very interesting that they're doing this a little bit different as they have in the past. So they'll be back doing an iRacing invite once again. So again, make sure you check back tomorrow for the iRacing, starting with the doubleheader, and we'll see kind of how things go there. Trayton Lapsevich still trying to help, pad his resume just a little bit, and if he's able to go out there and beat guys like Dale Earnhardt Jr., Ty Majeski, Parker Kligerman, which can't say that he hasn't done that before on iRacing. I don't follow it as much, but it should be something very interesting to see. Jim Haynes says did see a post from Glenn Stiers that he is doing the same thing with Gilroy Titan, who is the machining guy behind Titans of CNC, a machining company. He started that, also teaches CNC machining. Yep. Glenn Stiers, we had Clint Jeffrey on our SNS Live on Friday. And, we talked about how much Glenn's been doing. And, excuse me. And the one thing that Clint Jeffrey knows is the dedication that Glenn Stiers has. And he says, you haven't seen anything yet. There's a lot more that Glenn is really working. I really believe that this Glenn Stiers Racing facility is going to be the best facility in Canada. It's heading that way. And Glenn is putting people in place. He's making up, opportunities available for many different types of racers that will run in the NASCAR Canada Series and that will run at Ohsweken Speedway. Racers that'll run down south, and racers that'll stay up in Canada. Glenn's definitely putting in the effort to really build motorsports, not just on dirt, but also obviously on asphalt as well. And so whatever Glenn plans on doing, it sounds like there's a lot more that they're scheduled. Obviously, with Ohsweken Speedway being a favorite right now for SRX, which, if you're not familiar, SRX has been in conversations. There was TV meetings that took place that was announced here on G-Force TV, and now we're just waiting. I think it's not an easy thing to put together something like that, but I applaud Clinton and I applaud Glenn for all they're doing to try and continue to beef up motorsports. And then that takes us to a very interesting article that came out from Sports Business Journal with Adam Stern. If you guys aren't familiar with Adam Stern, he is, I would say he is the go-to when it comes to reporting NASCAR news. Stern has famously, similar to Jeff Gluck and Matt Weaver, very reputable source who puts together articles but also social media posts, typically doing a big announcement. Now, last year there was some rumors regarding the way that this series, the NASCAR Canada series, and its fellow international series would run. And they had teased the idea about having a universal chassis that is usable for each one of those series. The Euro Series, the Canada Series, Mexico Series, Brazil Series. And if I remember correctly, Alex Tagliani was asked about this. And Tag talked about how amazing the cars are. Ryan Vargas, actually, former Xfinity Series driver, was talking about his experience, I believe with Parker Kligerman, about what it was like to be a part of the Euro Series and how those cars drive. And it sounds, again, very similar. Like they're very much like the Pinty's cars and the NASCAR Canada cars now. But let's get into this a little bit and see what Adam Stern is reporting here, and then we'll talk about what people think about it, because it is very, very interesting idea, and whether it's doable now is also a big question mark. Doable in the future, but here's your article from Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal. NASCAR continues to test global waters. At a time when F1 is coming to America to grow its brand, traditionally U.S.-centric, NASCAR has conversely become focused on taking its brand global. Well, this is what's interesting about that first line, is we've been part of the NASCAR family since 2007. I think it's a little bit late to say that we're just focused on taking its brand global now. But with Chief International Officer Chad Siegler and the international team of roughly a dozen employees leading the charge. Among some of the recent developments, NASCAR ran its first season in Brazil this past year. And in highly welcomed news for NASCAR execs, ratings for the sport's U.S.-based Cup Series rose in Brazil this year concurrently with the introduction of the new regional series. I like to tell people that I don't think that it's a coincidence that we put a series down there and then it raised the profile of the Cup Series, Siegler said. The domino effect of all this is that Brazil can now be added to the list of potential sites to take the Cup Series, Siegler confirmed. Meanwhile, last week, now this is obviously an older article, but NASCAR announced it was changing the name of its Canadian and Regional League from the Pinty Series to the NASCAR Canada Series, moving away from a title sponsor model that has been there as long as the Cup Series has done in the U.S. The regional property will now operate with a premier partner sponsorship model, with a handful of major partners getting the series' best advertising assets to market against, aside from the name of the property itself. The former title sponsor, Canadian CPG company Pinty's Delicious Foods, which has been the title sponsor since 2016, and Canadian recycling company Evirum will be the first two presenting partners with additional sponsorships available. Now set to enter its 18th season, the NASCAR Canada Series will race 13 times across 6 of the country's 10 provinces next year, including one in Newfoundland that teams and their freight get to by ferry. Siegler said, we realize that in our international series, even more so than our U.S. series, that it's really important that we identify the region we're racing in with the name of the series. I think we can obviously agree on that one. One of the biggest things about the NASCAR Canada series is that you're giving it the name Canada in it. One thing that everybody loved about NASCAR is everybody knew it as Canadian NASCAR. Well, this basically is the same thing now. You call it NASCAR Canada series. Pretty simple. It tells you exactly where they're racing, and it says exactly what it is. It's NASCAR, it's Canada, and it's a series. Done. The other regional series are Mexico, Brazil, and Europe, but more could be on the way, which I definitely think we're going to see that. NASCAR looked at going to Canada in 2024 for what would have been only the second Cup Series race ever in the country, but negotiations fell through, and NASCAR is now reviewing its international options for 2025. When asked if Brazil is now a candidate for the Cup Series, Siegler said there's lots of places, but when we look at it, any of those places we're looking at for Cup or National Series, Xfinity, and trucks, a logical place for us to look is at one of the ones where we already have a presence. So Brazil, the culture is so strong, similar to Europe. There is a strong passion for American-style racing. No doubt Brazil is a market you look at really aggressively. Other markets, NASCAR is eyeing the world's most populous nation, India, as well as the Middle East. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because this is where I think we kind of go a little bit extreme, and I'm a little bit interested as to how functionally this would work. One of the goals of Siegler's group is to eventually create a Champions League of NASCAR-style racing, an event where it could bring, say, the best of its Euro Series to compete against the best from its Mexico, Canada, and Brazil series. NASCAR said such a venture remains in very early stages, including the type of race car that would make the most sense for the competition. So, the idea behind this is a universal chassis. This was what was teased last year. But having some sort of a Champions League between Mexico, Canada, are we not including the United States in this? Why? I mean, logically, you would think you do Canada, U.S., and Mexico together. Add in Brazil. There you go. You've got 4. Have the wheeling teams fly over. The biggest thing, as Ultimate Racer says, the first obvious question is it financially sustainable for all teams in the series? And I would say no. Jim Haynes says it is not easy to move away from a naming rights sponsor when you can't get one to pay up just as an observance. It's absolutely true as well, Jim, is that it isn't that easy to move away, but take a look at Whelen. Whelan's still involved with the Euro Series, and they've been there for a long period of time. So clearly, whatever system they've got there, that's been working. But if Pinty's is not able to sustain the full cost for sponsoring and having naming rights of the series, definitely it makes it the right time to switch it up and add the name change. But interestingly enough, on the NASCAR Brazil sprint race, and I believe on the NASCAR Mexico series, they don't have their presenting partners featured in their main logo. So I'm not sure what that means, but maybe there is it's a harder sell. The idea that I've heard regarding this universal chassis is that it would make it more cost effective, but for who? If it's more cost effective for teams to have this new chassis to then be able to run this big Champions League series, okay, absolutely interesting, but aside from one big, and basically off that, it says like they wanted a league. So you want another series, or you want to run a bunch of different races that all these competitors would become a part to, because you also have to think about all the other schedules that are in play here. A lot of competitors in our series, well, they have day jobs. They don't get paid to be racers all year round. So I think we're jumping a little quick here. If I'm being completely honest, I think that as a series like this, we haven't expanded to full Canada yet, and we don't know how our fields are going to be. You cannot expect to rely solely on the partnerships that we have right now. There needs to be expansive growth, and there needs to be money. Jim says they did try the Japan and Australia thing, but found it was too much money for the ratings, and the track in Aussie has been closed for many, many years. The other side of it too, Jim, is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, those were not points races. They were done after the season. So what was the incentive to go? Like, at the end of the day, there needs to be some sort of point. If it's a championship, that's great, but championship needs to have money. And it needs to be a substantial, like, if we're thinking about this from the NASCAR Canada point, like, you need to have, I would expect you're going to need to have payments for travel, for time away, because that's a huge, huge thing. I feel like this is going to be a lot harder than they're thinking. And what I would really think that they should be focusing on a little bit more than this is building all these series up, not to just benefit the Cup Series ratings. I think that you need to try and build it up as a national series. One that could be thought of, again, as Canada's top racing series. It's not right now. Like, let's be honest here. There's plenty of other racing series in Canada. Is it the only one that really travels across Canada? Yes. But what's like, if we're just going to do this for a show, I don't see there being any sort of interest from the teams. What is the end goal for a lot of racers that are in this series right now? Well, you have the young guns that would love to be able to race down south and eventually move their way into the Trucks, Xfinity, or the Cup Series. But we have a lot of racers that are past that point, that are racing for fun, that do it because they love it, and there's no way that they would be able to afford this. So I'm not here to poo-poo the idea right away, but I think what we have to do is have a series that can have enough strength, first off, to be able to have competitors go and participate in this. If it's a matter of like IROC, and this would be my suggestion, is you have a universal chassis that is prepared and handled by somebody else, and you just have the drivers show and then participate. I think having it where the actual teams from each respective series, that's a little bit tough. I don't see how that would work. Jim Haynes, remember when ARCA went to South Africa and the guy in charge was the Slicky Boy and still wanted to buy the law? Yes, I do remember that. I saw actually there's a good YouTube retrospective on that event, and I myself wasn't familiar with that race, but it taught me quite a lot about that, and it is it's a little odd when you think about going to certain venues because, and the other thing that I think we have to say is where, oh, where has that worked in the past? Because we've tried it, like you said. We went to Japan. They went, and the Japan races were quite good. The fan base was very, very supportive, but at the end of the day, it wasn't worth the travel. It wasn't worth the money. He was one of the guys that tried to buy a series here too. And see, there you go. I think you want to have more stability here first, and obviously us taking the trip all across Canada this year, we're still not going to BC. Which I don't know whether or not that's ever going to be doable because I don't believe there's a track out there that is capable of taking on or wants to take on the NASCAR Canada Series. So again, you have to have the money to do it. Penticton Speedway out there, Area 27. I really don't know much more than that. Motoplex has been closed for a long time, so that's not an option, formerly Sun Valley. So I don't really know if there is an option out in BC anymore. And then we're going out to Edmonton. We're going out to Sutherland. Whether there's other tracks out there, we still don't travel to Manitoba for a race. So I think the biggest hurdle right now is next year. This is the telling year. There's a lot of hope, obviously, from them that they want to have an international Champions League, which I would love it. I mean, I think you take 5 from each and you have them in IROC cars or something similar to like an SRX thing, have them compete against 5 drivers from Euro, 5 drivers from Mexico, 5 drivers from Brazil, 5 drivers from, I don't know, Euro. All of a sudden, then you can have a good working series, but I don't think if you put that all on the teams to provide the chassis to travel, I don't see it. I don't know in terms of the money, in terms of the Euro Series, Mexico Series, how well off a lot of those teams are compared to the Canada Series, but it's a big difference when you're talking about additional races overseas, especially when it's not something that our series does. I mean, we tried going to New Hampshire for many years, and there's a lot of people that were very supportive, very much that liked the New Hampshire races. I can't really go out and say that I was the biggest fan of those events. I thought that the racing really wasn't as good as it could have been, especially considering what we saw for NASCAR Canada races here on the regular. Now, maybe if they didn't go to New Hampshire, maybe if they did go to a smaller track, honestly. A lot of the Brazil guys are old F1 and IndyCar guys that race stock car series down there. So again, you're not, whether if these guys are like Tag, who've, they just look at something and print money. I mean, maybe it's a little bit easier for them, but like you're talking about guys like Larry Jackson who just tries to make it to each race with the budget that he has. Well, you tell him now he's got to get a new chassis and he's going to have to travel to friggin' Brazil to race. Well, I think that's a little far-fetched, right? So I applaud them. I think that it's good that you've got new ideas, but I think the strength needs to be, and the focus needs to be here first, and it needs to be on building the year, and we don't have partners on every race car. That's the reality. We don't have strong multi-million-dollar investments coming in. We need those, though. I think if you're able to go out and get big-time partnerships to be involved, which, let's be honest, we really haven't seen those yet. And I think now having it as NASCAR Canada Series very well could help it be a little bit more attractive. But again, having a series that has a Champions League, to me, the only way you can do it is like IROC. I think it would be much more fun to watch. And then you have each car done up for the national series. So you have your red and white cars, similar to what, if you guys maybe you would remember, I'm not sure, A1G, was it called A1GP, I believe? And that had two racers in Formula One style. I think they were like GP3 cars at the time, competing in championships. And we had like Robert Wickens and Sean McIntosh that drove for Canada. I think Carpentier did one. I could see something like that, where, again, it's a universal car, and you bring in a couple competitors. They run in a Pinty's or a Vyram branded NASCAR Canada car with their number. But a lot of it is, I feel like it would have to be maintained and run by NASCAR completely, which maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Now, if they do go around and say that they want a universal chassis, meaning that all the series internationally will all have the exact same car, then that opens a whole other thing. What would be interesting is what happens to those cars if they say they don't need them anymore. Well, naturally, the Ontario Sportsman Series is the best place to take those cars. I believe you can also, the Oscar Hot Rods, they can run with those chassis. But that would be huge for a smaller division within Ontario, because then all of a sudden you have a surplus of cars, which is exactly what we would want. However, again, I can't see that we're just going to automatically just say every one of those cars is now not usable, because it's going to take a good amount of time to get these cars made. And that's going to be very, very difficult. So if all of a sudden DJ Kennington just needs one special car that he has to race, then yeah, sure, that's not so bad. But if all of a sudden he has to sell or get rid of every car that he's got, that's probably not going to work. So again, I think this is something that people might be worried that this is just going to happen. I don't see that it's that quick. I can't see that this is going to be a quick series or a quick league that just comes together in the next year or so. There's so much work that would have to be done to it. And the teams would really need to have a lot of money to do it. Especially if the cost of the cars is a lot cheaper, that's great. That's perfect. That's what they would want. But Jim says, IROC worked because of sponsors and ratings, so it is going to be a hard sell these days unless the right package can be found. Well, and that's the other side of it too, Jim, is I feel like if you're going to do this, you kind of need to have NASCAR be the one to spearhead it and be the presenting partner. But I also think it's kind of I would put maybe some drivers in from the U.S. Like, I don't see why we would just do a Champions League and not include, because that puts them. It comes across very odd to me why you have the top three divisions, but you're not going to put the top three divisions in it, which I totally get. That's fair. So if you're going to put somebody in, put your ARCA drivers in, or put this in, or your top wheeling All-American drivers, Xfinity, if you don't want to put Cup drivers in. But I'm trying to I'm struggling with what what is the need here. I don't believe anybody's asking for this. And again, I think what a lot of fans, and I think if you ask any single one of those fans in Mexico, in Brazil, in Europe, and in Canada, what we want is really strong international series. We want tons of cars. You want lots of partners, and you want drivers to get good payout. I mean, it's not an easy thing to go out and say, oh, can we automatically make it so that each one of these guys is making so much money that they can all afford another car? They can afford to do all that type of stuff. It seems a little far-fetched right now, but the goal, I guess, would be next year. I think 2024 is this is the year that if they're going to make a substantial gain, they have to do it in 2024. Whether it is through sponsorship, whether it is through ratings, whether it is through attendance, this is it. This needs to be the solid year that they are hoping for. You've got a new person in charge. You've got a lot of buzz from NASCAR International, a whole rebrand taking place. This is the time. I'm talking updates on the website, new photos for every driver, interviews with every driver, featuring pictures of the cars on each bio, featuring their sponsors listed on the pages and very clear. Maybe the series could tap into Eastern Ontario. It could take a huge step. I can't talk about the series where I live because no one knows about it. It's sad because there is potential. You know, the problem is, though, Ultimate Racer, is that I also feel that Eastern Ontario we're losing that buzz. I mean, if you're going to do, I think, a Champions League, you got to go to Delaware Speedway here, unless you're going to go, which I think is their plan, which is going to be more road course racing. The fact that I have a feeling like that's what they would want to do. CTMP to me is the place that they would go. I think if they're going to do some sort of a series like that, CTMP, Montreal, GP3R, those are your top three. Then I think, because I think Delaware is very low on their totem pole of tracks they would want to go to. But there's a lot of places, and that's the thing. I can't talk about the series where I live because no one knows about it. It's a sad reality, though, Ultimate Racer has here. And that is that there are so many racing series and no one knows about them. I mean, I work for a series right now, and a lot of people still have no idea that it exists. And it was part of NASCAR. This series, NASCAR Canada, Ultimate Racer in a way, NASCAR Canada series is still very, very unknown. Very unknown. And again, this is where I'm talking about, this is the year. You have rebranded it and made Canada a huge part of its name. It is the name. So, events like GP3R, we didn't have a problem before. They always had good attendance. Lots of love from the locals, from the province. This is the real test, is this year. You've made this change, and to draw people in, the cost has to come down. You need to be able to bring new racers in, and not just new racers to come in and run one race. That's the other side of it too. You take a lot of competitors that only race in Quebec. What would it take to get those racers to come out west, to go out to the Maritimes, to go back and run in Ontario at CTMP, to run at Delaware? It's doable. A lot of them it's doable. But you have to remember, again, a lot of it's businesses that maybe they don't do business in Ontario, or they don't do business in Quebec or in the Maritimes. So what is that allure for them? So there needs to be something of the sort of getting a countrywide partners to come into the series and help out the competitors. I mean, it's very easy to put people that are very successful. And we know that the NASCAR Cup Series is still like the prized possession. But when I say this, I truly mean that it needs to be, and this is coming from a huge NASCAR Canada fan, it needs to become the priority. If NASCAR International really wants to create this Champions League, you really do, I think, need to focus solely on building this series. I just think there's got to be a stronger collaboration between Southern NASCAR and Canada NASCAR. Big blow when CTMP lost the Truck Series, and with it, any hope of an Xfinity race. And I'll add to that with the No Cup race in 2024. Why are negotiations breaking down? That's the key thing. Every race, for the most part, every race that the series had in Montreal and at CTMP was always great. Great finishes. Amazing finishes. Some of the best that the series has ever had across the trucks and Xfinity. So why are the conversations breaking down? What is it that is causing the friction that's not causing things to be built? Because ultimately, whether it's money, there's something wrong. And a stronger collaboration with Southern NASCAR and Canada NASCAR, I actually would disagree a little bit. Ultimate Racer. And I think I know where you're coming from. But I kind of feel like you need to have Canadians that know the racing scene, that know the markets, trying to operate this series and push it from a Canadian perspective. I think the problem is that when you do have people from Florida trying to make the calls, that they cannot be here for every race. That's the reality. Cannot be here for every single race. I don't know if a stronger collaboration with Southern NASCAR is the way to work. Because I think what needs to happen is Alain Labrosse, as the new GM, needs to be given basically full reign. Similar to when Tony Spiteri was in, I kind of feel the same thing. Like, give them full reign. Let them do what they know best. Talk with their partners. Talk with people that they know. Change, whether it's prices or rates, or build those new connections. Again, I'm only speaking from it as an outsider. I'm not somebody that is tight with the higher ups, right? I'm somebody that loves the series and it's a fan first, always. But as a fan, I definitely do feel it's a little weird having our series run by people in the U.S. when we have plenty of capable people here. And of course, that's part of the corporate side of things. Absolutely. But I'll tell you, there's some great people. Obviously, Chad, we know Chad Sigler, Josh Hamilton's been a part of things. But I'll tell you, a guy who got to know a little bit last year is Jason Simmons. He could very well be something big for our series, because I felt it last year. I think he's got so much passion, so much love for racing, and he showed multiple times. He was at the finale, and actually he was at Sunset as well. And I definitely think that there's some hidden gems there. I don't think too much down south control with no support has been good, and it shows. They are the big guy that gets his cut first of everything, and it's tough because ultimately you need their support, you need their investments, you need their money, you need their contacts. But in terms of what the racing fans need, I feel, and just based off of operating and running the community group on Facebook, that a lot of fans don't feel respected. And sure, that might be everywhere. I think you see it all the time in the Cup Series, but I think that there's a lot of belief, especially a lot of the stuff with Delaware. I can understand that. I can understand that being an issue. But a lot of fans want the series to respect its past. Ultimate Racer says, I don't think anyone appreciates Canadian motorsports south of the border, which is sad. 2 Cup tracks series would have lost races if not for Canadian fans. Watkins Glen in Michigan. That's so correct. Now, if you ask me, Ultimate Racer, I think a place that they should have gone is Watkins Glen with the Pinty series. I know we did New Hampshire, but let's be honest here. While oval racing is definitely a big, big buzz, our road course program is by far one of the best things about the series. And our road course racers are some of the best. And if we were able to take guys like MBS Motorsports, Dumoulin Competition, 22 Racing, DJK Racing, EHR, Kevin Lacroix, Lacroix Autosports, and now all of a sudden you add Paye Racing. You add all these names to run on a road course. I'd be very curious to see how our guys do. Because they put on great races here. And I think it's not a matter as much as of appreciation, but there's the care, I think, is the biggest thing. And this is where small things as a race fan, it shows a lack of care. And I'm going to have to sadly agree with Ultimate Racer that there are things that, as a race fan, it comes off very disrespectful. Spelling the champion's name wrong twice. They spelt it wrong for the championship ceremony, for which Trayton Lapsevich went up on stage and his name is spelled wrong. And in the iRacing article just now, they spelled his name wrong there as well. Would never spell Chase Elliott or Dale Earnhardt's name wrong. Right? So something like that needs to be tuned up. Other people within the racing community, Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself calling it the Pinty Series. I can't remember who else it was. Oh, it was the announcer at Five Flags calling it the Pinty Series. It shows that people don't know the series because they're not even saying it right. They're not saying the driver's name right. That needs to change. There needs to be more recognition and more support that way. You can't have just Matt Weaver singing the praises. And so I hate to say that Ultimate Racer is correct. Ultimate Racer says the brick wall there is NASCAR hasn't put the truck series on Watkins Glen. Well, that's true. Jim Haynes says, I don't know. I think with many fans here, I always like seeing Ron Fellows do well in his many races here. The problem is with the Daytona Mafia. Well, I'm not going to call them that, but it would be something. If I'm looking at it going, if you're going to try the U.S. experiment again, Watkins Glen would be the place for me. I think you got to try a very, very short track. If you're going to go down south, New Hampshire was okay, but it wasn't as short of a track that our guys typically race on. So give them something a lot smaller than that, and they can definitely showcase. But this is the real test this year, is that they're going to be going out to do those races in Newfoundland, in Riverside, Edmonton, and Sutherland. And those are going to be the biggest races for our series in many, many years. Because if we go out there and you've got 13 cars again, that's a problem. The idea going back out there is that you're going to have full fields. And if they don't get full fields again, that's a problem. And anything that they're looking at in the future in terms of a Champions League would need to be put on the side. It would have to be. Like, I cannot see that working if you're not able to get enough competitors to every race on your schedule. Now, we hit the gold pot last year. We hit the jackpot because we got 60 racers to compete. 60 different names raced with us last year. 60 different racers in 14 events. That is insane when you think about it. 60. Now, sure, we can go back to the CASCAR days when 60 racers tried to qualify for a race at Delaware, but things are different. The big tell next year is going to be, are we going to get those new teams? Are we going to get new competitors? We always kind of do. We typically have one or two. But the big question for me right now is, are we going to lose competitors? Right now, it sounds like 2023 champion Trayton Lapsevich is not back. It doesn't sound, so far at least, that we're going to see Kyle Steckley full-time. There's been no announcement about that. I would look towards our regulars being back. That's typical what we see, but there tends to always be one or two surprises that show up or don't show up. I'm very curious to see where we go from here. It's still an off season with a lot still to come. Whether there's personnel changes, whether there's people coming in and out of the series in the next year or so, Alain Labrosse has the toughest job. I definitely, if I look at it from a series standpoint, so if I'm looking at it from, if I'm treating this as a national championship, our schedule is amazing. A national championship, that schedule is fantastic. I just don't want it to sink. I just don't want us to sink. That's the biggest worry for me right now. And I think as a fan, obviously you're going to be a little more concerned. But those little teams, you want to see them succeed. I want to see some of these guys come back and have good runs. You know, Trayton Lapsevich, thank you. If he's not back, thank you. He and his brother Caden definitely showcased some amazing young talent. If I had my way, man, if we had the way to do it, and if we didn't have so many cost issues, they both would be back in the series. If this was my series, I'd be doing whatever the heck I could do to get both of them back full time. And it says something when you can't get enough partners for those two. Now, in terms of on-track approach, interview skills, very different. Very, 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 very different. But you cannot deny the talent. Definitely one thing that we want to make sure that you guys do, give us a thumbs up on GeForce TV. Helps us with the algorithm. There are changes coming to the show as well. We're looking at for 2024. There's a lot of good that we have going on right now in the motorsports scene, and we want to make sure that we are able to continue to report and talk about it. But the holiday season is upon us. We didn't get a chance to get into, so we'll push it to next week, about what our wishes are. If you have a holiday wish for next year, what would it be? Would drivers first win? A new competitor, new team, different looking car, announcing, live. It is imperative that we continue to support our racing series all over Ontario, all over Canada. And by doing so, by subscribing to GeForce TV, you are definitely doing that. We get to showcase all sorts of great racing across the country, especially at Ohsweken Speedway. Lots of great stuff happening out there for 2024. Of course, the APC series. We have not heard yet what's going to be happening yet with that schedule or with that broadcast. So be very curious to see what happens with that. But then, of course, we've got one more week, and then we'll be off for the holidays. So if you are going to be back next week, definitely make sure you think about that wish, what you're thinking about, what you'd like to have happen next year. But this is Cam K. I'm going to end this a little bit earlier tonight, where we've gone through the topics that we wanted to cover. But Jim, Ultimate Racer, appreciate it. Al, appreciate you guys coming on and chatting. Not a very busy chat tonight, but Gord as well. Gord Mead, thank you. But we had a good amount of people that just stayed in and kept in tune for most of the show tonight. But we appreciate it. Have yourselves a great night. We'll be back for episode 70 next week before we head off for our holiday break. If you can, again, remember, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. And we'll catch